The desert sun beat down mercilessly on Camp Leatherneck as Staff Sergeant Maya Chen walked across the dusty compound. Her small frame moved with quiet confidence, but to the untrained eye, she looked like just another support personnel making her way between buildings. The baggy desert camouflage uniform concealed her athletic build, and her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun beneath her cap. She had been stationed at this forward operating base in Afghanistan for 2 weeks now, but most of the Marines didn't know who she was. That was exactly how she preferred it. Maya had learned long ago that sometimes it was better to let people underestimate you. The chow hall buzzed with the usual dinner crowd when Maya entered. She grabbed a tray and moved through the line, collecting her meal in silence. The conversations around her were typical military banter, complaints about the heat, jokes about the food, and stories from recent patrols. At a corner table sat 11 Marines from the 2nd Battalion. They were a tight-knit group, having served together through multiple deployments. Corporal Jake Morrison, their unofficial leader, was telling an animated story about their latest mission when he noticed Maya sitting alone at a nearby table. "Hey, look at that," Jake said, nodding in Maya's direction. "New girl looks lost." The other Marines turned to look. Private First Class Danny Torres, the youngest of the group, squinted across the room. "She's been here a couple weeks. Haven't seen her with any unit, though. Probably some desk jockey," added Lance Corporal Rick Santos. "Look how small she is. What's she gonna do if things go sideways out there?" The comments continued around the table, growing louder and more pointed. These Marines had been through hell together. They had lost friends in firefights and had each other's backs in the most dangerous situations imaginable. To them, everyone either pulled their weight or was a liability. "Someone should let her know this ain't summer camp," Jake said, his voice carrying across the room now. "This is a combat zone." Maya heard every word. She had been dealing with comments like these her entire career. At first, it had bothered her. Now, she simply used it as fuel. She continued eating calmly, her expression never changing. The Marines' voices grew louder. Other soldiers in the chow hall began to notice the tension building. Some looked uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. This wasn't unusual. New people often got tested, especially in a combat zone where trust and capability meant everything. "Maybe we should introduce ourselves," suggested Sergeant Mike Walsh, the second in command of the group. "Show her how things work around here." Jake stood up, and the others followed. They approached Maya's table as a group, forming a semicircle around her. The chow hall grew quieter as other diners sensed something was about to happen. "Excuse me, miss," Jake said, his tone condescending. "You new here?" Maya looked up from her meal, her dark eyes calm and steady. "I am." "Well, let me give you some advice," Jake continued. "This isn't some safe little base back home. People die out here. Real soldiers die because someone couldn't do their job right." "That's good advice," Maya replied quietly, taking another bite of her food. The calm response seemed to irritate Jake more. "Are you even listening to me? Do you understand what I'm saying?" Maya set down her fork and looked directly at him. "I understand perfectly." "I don't think you do," interjected Danny Torres. "Look at you. You're tiny. What happens when someone needs backup and you can't handle it?" The other Marines nodded in agreement. They had seen too many good soldiers get hurt because someone else couldn't pull their weight. In their minds, they were protecting their brothers by weeding out weakness. "What unit are you even with?" asked Rick Santos. "We haven't seen you on any patrols." "I keep busy," Maya answered simply. "Doing what? Filing papers?" This got laughs from several of the Marines. Maya remained calm, but something in her eyes began to change. Those who knew what to look for might have recognized it as the look of a predator, evaluating threats. But these Marines were so focused on proving their point that they missed the warning signs. "Listen, sweetheart," Jake said, leaning closer to Maya's table. "Maybe you should request a transfer back to somewhere safer before you get hurt, or get someone else hurt." The word sweetheart hung in the air like a challenge. Other soldiers in the chow hall shifted uncomfortably. This had gone from hazing to something more serious. Maya slowly stood up. Even at full height, she was several inches shorter than most of the Marines surrounding her. But something about the way she moved made a few of them unconsciously step back. "I appreciate your concern," she said, her voice still controlled and quiet. "But I think I'll be just fine." "Will you though?" Jake pressed. "Because when the shooting starts, it's not about being tough. It's about training. Real training. Not whatever they taught you in basic." That was the moment Maya's patience finally ran out. These Marines thought they knew what real training looked like. They were about to learn something new. The tension in the room reached a breaking point. Every conversation had stopped. Everyone was watching now, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Maya looked around at the 11 faces surrounding her. These were good Marines, she realized. They were wrong about her, but their hearts were in the right place. They wanted to protect their unit and their brothers in arms. In different circumstances, she would have respected their dedication. But respect was earned, not given. And it was time for a lesson. "Tell you what," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chow hall. "Why don't you show me what real training looks like?" The challenge hung in the air like smoke from a grenade. Jake Morrison felt his chest swell with confidence. Finally, this desk jockey was going to learn what real military training meant. Around him, his fellow Marines exchanged glances. This wasn't what they had planned, but they were committed now. "All right," Jake said with a cocky grin. "But when you get embarrassed out there, remember, you asked for this." Maya simply nodded. "Outside then?" The entire chow hall emptied as word spread quickly through the base. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered in the training area behind the main buildings. Marines, soldiers, and support staff formed a loose circle around the makeshift arena. Someone had even called over a few officers, who watched from a distance with curious expressions. The 11 Marines spread out, confident and relaxed. They had done this before with overconfident newbies. Usually, it ended quickly and taught valuable lessons about humility and respect. Maya stood in the center, appearing tiny, surrounded by the larger Marines. She had removed her cap and rolled up her sleeves, revealing surprisingly muscled forearms. But to most of the watching crowd, she still looked like David facing 11 Goliaths. "Rules?" asked Sergeant Mike Walsh. "No permanent injuries," Maya replied simply. "Everything else goes." Jake laughed. "Lady, you sure about this? Last chance to back down gracefully." Maya's response was to drop into a combat stance so fluid and natural it made several of the watching officers lean forward with sudden interest. Her entire demeanor changed in an instant. Gone was the quiet, unassuming support person. In her place stood someone who moved like violence, was her native language. The first Marine to rush her was Danny Torres, the youngest and most eager to prove himself. He came in fast and confident, expecting to overwhelm her with size and strength. Maya sidestepped his charge with minimal movement, grabbed his extended arm, and used his own momentum to send him sprawling into the dirt. The entire sequence took less than 2 seconds. Danny rolled to his feet, embarrassed and angry. "Lucky shot," he muttered. But Jake was already moving, more cautious now. He approached with proper technique, hands up in a boxer's stance. He threw a careful jab, testing her reactions. Maya caught his wrist, pivoted, and drove her elbow into his solar plexus. As Jake doubled over, gasping for air, she swept his legs and sent him to the ground beside Danny. The watching crowd began to murmur. This wasn't going the way anyone had expected. Rick Santos tried a different approach, attempting to tackle Maya low. She dropped her center of gravity, caught him as he came in, and threw him over her shoulder in a perfect judo toss. Rick landed hard on his back, the wind knocked out of him. Now the other 8 Marines began to realize they might be in trouble. They attacked as a group, trying to overwhelm her with numbers. Maya moved like water flowing around rocks. She ducked under grasping hands, redirected punches into empty air, and struck with surgical precision at pressure points and joint locks. Each movement was efficient, calculated, and devastatingly effective. Lance Corporal Kevin Murphy came at her from behind while she was dealing with 2 others. Maya somehow sensed his approach without looking, spun around, and delivered a strike to his throat that dropped him instantly but safely. The watching crowd had gone silent except for the sounds of the fight. Even the officers were staring now, recognizing something they hadn't expected to see. Within 30 seconds, all 11 Marines were on the ground in various states of discomfort and disbelief. Maya stood in the center of them, breathing normally, not even sweating despite the desert heat. The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then Jake, still trying to catch his breath, managed to croak out the question everyone was thinking. What the hell are you?" Maya looked down at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she seemed to be deciding something. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small wallet. She flipped it open, revealing an identification card. "Petty Officer First Class Maya Chen," she said quietly. "Naval Special Warfare Development Group." The silence that followed was deafening. DEVGRU. The most elite unit in the Navy. What the public called SEAL Team 6. Though operators never used that name. The tip of the spear for the most dangerous missions the United States military undertook. Jake's eyes widened as the implications sank in. "You're a SEAL?" "I'm a SEAL," Maya confirmed. Corporal Morrison felt his face burn with embarrassment. Around him, his fellow Marines were struggling to their feet, all of them wearing similar expressions of shock and mortification. But you're," Danny Torres started to say, then stopped himself. "A woman?" Maya finished for him. "Yes. I'm also someone who has been through 24 months of the most demanding military training in the world, someone who has completed missions in 12 different countries, someone who has been shot at, blown up, and tested in ways that would break most people." She looked around at the 11 Marines, her expression softening slightly. "You're good Marines, I can see that. You care about your unit, your brothers, your mission. But you let assumptions cloud your judgment." Jake struggled to his feet, his pride battered, but his integrity intact. "Ma'am, we owe you an apology." "You owe me nothing," Maya replied. "You were protecting your unit the only way you knew how. That's commendable. Even if your methods were flawed." Rick Santos rubbed his back where he had hit the ground. "How long have you been a SEAL?" 4 years active. Made it through Bud S on my first try." She paused, watching their faces process this information. "I'm here on a classified mission. That's why you haven't seen me with any regular unit." The crowd began to disperse. But the buzz of conversation was intense. Word would spread through the base within hours. The story would be told and retold, growing with each telling. Mike Walsh, the most senior of the Marines, stepped forward. "Petty Officer Chen, we were completely out of line. There's no excuse for what we did." Maya studied his face, seeing genuine remorse there. "Sergeant Walsh, right? I read your service record when I arrived. 3 tours, 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star. You've earned the right to question whether someone can pull their weight in a combat zone. But not like this," Walsh replied firmly. "Not with disrespect." "No," Maya agreed. "Not like this." Jake approached more hesitantly. His confidence was completely shattered, replaced by a humility that was foreign to him. "Ma'am, is there any way we can make this right?" Maya considered the question seriously. These Marines had learned a valuable lesson today. But lessons were only valuable if they led to growth and change. "Actually," she said slowly, "there might be." 3 days later, Maya found herself standing in the early morning darkness outside the Marine barracks. It was 0500 hours, and the base was just beginning to stir. She had spent the intervening time thinking about Jake's question and what her answer should be. The door opened before she could knock. Jake Morrison emerged, already dressed in full combat gear. Behind him came the other 10 Marines, all equipped for patrol. They had clearly been expecting her. "Petty Officer Chen," Jake said formally. "We're ready." Maya nodded, impressed despite herself. "You didn't have to get up early for this." "Number 12. We farther was." "Yes, ma'am. We did." replied Mike Walsh. We've been thinking about what you said. About making this right. Over the past 3 days, the story of the confrontation had indeed spread throughout the base, just as Maya had predicted. But instead of embarrassing the Marines, the story had taken an unexpected turn. Rather than focusing on their humiliation, the narrative had become about respect, assumptions, and the reality of modern warfare. We want to train with you, Danny Torres said, his youthful enthusiasm genuine. We want to learn what we don't know. Maya had prepared for anger, resentment, or attempts to save face. She hadn't prepared for genuine humility and a desire to grow. It reminded her why she had joined the military in the first place. Training with a SEAL isn't like regular PT. She warned them. It's not about proving how tough you are. It's about finding your limits and then pushing past them. We understand, said Rick Santos. We've been talking about it. About how we acted, what it meant, what we can learn from it. Maya studied their faces in the dim light. These were the same Marines who had surrounded her in the chow hall 3 days ago, but they were different now. The experience had stripped away their arrogance and replaced it with something more valuable. Wisdom. All right, she said finally. But we do this properly. No shortcuts, no complaining, no quitting. What followed was the most intense training session any of the Marines had ever experienced. Maya led them through exercises that combined physical conditioning, tactical movement, and mental challenges. She taught them breathing techniques used by special operations forces, showed them close-quarters combat movements they had never seen, and pushed their endurance beyond what they thought possible. By the end of 2 hours, all 11 Marines were exhausted but exhilarated. They had learned more in those 2 hours than in weeks of regular training. This is just the beginning, Maya told them as they recovered. Real improvement takes time, dedication, and the willingness to admit when you're wrong. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead. Petty Officer Chen, can I ask you something? Go ahead. When you first enlisted, did they treat you the way we did? Maya was quiet for a moment, remembering her early days in the Navy. Worse, she said finally. Much worse. The difference was, I was determined to prove them wrong. But you know what I learned? Proving people wrong isn't the same as earning their respect. What's the difference? Asked Kevin Murphy. Proving people wrong is about you, Maya explained. Earning respect is about them. It's about helping them become better, not just showing them that you are. The conversation continued as they walked back toward the main base. Maya found herself sharing stories she rarely told, about the challenges of being a woman in special operations, about the teammates who had accepted her and those who hadn't, about learning to lead through competence rather than confrontation. The Marines listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and sharing their own experiences. Maya realized that something important was happening here. These men weren't just learning about her or about women in combat roles. They were learning about leadership, respect, and what it meant to be part of something larger than themselves. Word of the morning training sessions spread quickly through the base. Other Marines asked to join, then soldiers from other units. Within a week, Maya was running daily training sessions that drew participants from across the base. But more importantly, the 11 Marines who had confronted her had become something unexpected: allies and advocates. When new personnel arrived at the base, these Marines were the first to explain that respect was earned through competence, not granted based on appearance. When other soldiers made assumptions about women in combat roles, these Marines shared what they had learned. 2 weeks after their initial confrontation, Maya was called to the base commander's office. Colonel Patricia Williams, a career Marine officer, gestured for Maya to sit. Petty Officer Chen, I've been hearing interesting reports about your activities here. Maya kept her expression neutral. Yes, ma'am. Apparently, you've been conducting unofficial training sessions. And apparently, those sessions have had a remarkable effect on morale and performance. The Marines here are highly motivated, ma'am. They just needed the right opportunity to show it. Colonel Williams smiled. That's a diplomatic way to put it. I've also heard about the incident in the chow hall. Maya tensed slightly. Yes, ma'am. Relax, petty officer. You're not in trouble. In fact, I wanted to commend you on how you handled the situation. You could have made those Marines look foolish. Instead, you turned it into a teaching moment. They're good Marines, ma'am. They deserved a chance to learn and grow. Yes, they are. And speaking of learning and growing, I have a proposition for you. Colonel Williams leaned forward. Your classified mission here is nearly complete, correct? Maya nodded carefully. I've been authorized to extend your stay if you're willing. We'd like you to formalize these training programs. Create something that can be replicated at other bases. Maya considered the offer. Her original mission had been routine intelligence gathering. Important but not particularly rewarding. This was something different. This was a chance to make a real difference. I'd be honored, ma'am. 6 months later, the Integration and Excellence Training Program had been implemented at 12 forward operating bases across Afghanistan and Iraq. The program focused not just on physical conditioning and tactical skills, but on breaking down assumptions, building trust between different military units, and creating an environment where all service members could contribute to their fullest potential. Maya often thought back to that evening in the chow hall. 11 Marines had surrounded her, convinced they knew what she was and what she was capable of. In 30 seconds, their world had been turned upside down. But the real change hadn't happened in those 30 seconds of combat. It had happened in the days and weeks that followed, as they chose to learn rather than resent, to grow rather than make excuses. Jake Morrison, now a staff sergeant himself, had become one of the program's most effective instructors. He often told new trainees about the day he learned that strength came in many forms, and that the deadliest warriors weren't always the ones you expected. Danny Torres had applied for special operations training, inspired by what he had witnessed. Rick Santos had become an advocate for women in combat roles throughout his unit. Each of the 11 Marines had taken the lesson they learned and made it part of who they were. As for Maya, she had learned something too. Being the best warrior meant more than just being able to fight. It meant being able to teach, to inspire, and to help others become their best selves. The program's motto, suggested by Mike Walsh and approved by Maya, was simple. Respect is earned, not assumed. It was a lesson learned in 30 seconds but lived every day thereafter. And it made every service member who learned it more effective, more confident, and more capable of protecting the people who depended on them. In the end, that was what military service was really about. Not proving how tough you were, but ensuring that when people needed protection, when freedom was threatened, when the impossible had to be accomplished, there were people ready to answer the call. People like Maya Chen, people like Jake Morrison and his fellow Marines. People who had learned that true strength came not from assumptions, but from the willingness to be surprised, to learn, and to become better than they thought possible. The desert sun continued to beat down on Camp Leatherneck. But something fundamental had changed. Respect was no longer about size or gender or preconceived notions. It was about competence, character, and the commitment to serve something larger than oneself. And that made everyone stronger.